Okay, so like most of us, I am guessing you're probably already a coffee drinker?
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty safe bet.
Right. But what if I told you that that cup that you're having every morning could be doing way more than just helping you wake up?
Yeah, that's right. We're going to be diving into the latest research on all the potential health benefits of drinking coffee.
And it really is fascinating stuff, and I think it might actually make you rethink just how much coffee you're having each day and when you're having it.
Yeah, definitely.
So, for this deep dive, we have analyzed a ton of recent studies, reviews, and medical
All
publications.
the latest stuff.
Yeah, we're talking the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology,
Mhm.
the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism, the European Heart Journal, and Medical News Today, just to name a few.
So we've done all the hard work, so you don't have to
Exactly.
just sit back, relax, and enjoy your coffee while we break it all down.
Yeah, so one of the things that I found most interesting is that there's some evidence that coffee can actually help you live longer,
Yeah, that's right.
which is pretty crazy when you think about it.
It is. And there was a study in 2022 by Kissler and his team. It was published in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology. And they found that people who drank 2 to 3 cups of coffee a day actually lived longer than those who didn't drink any coffee at all.
Hmm.
And they also found that it didn't really matter what kind of coffee you drank.
So it's not just the caffeine.
No, not
Like
necessarily.
what about decaf?
They looked at ground coffee, instant coffee, and even decaf, and all of them showed some benefit.
Wow, so even decaf drinkers had a lower risk of dying.
Yep, even decaf coffee drinkers had a 14% lower risk of dying from any cause, and ground coffee drinkers had an even lower risk, about 27%.
That is amazing, but like with all these studies, we have to remember that most of them are observational.
Right.
So they can show us correlations, but they can't necessarily prove that it was the coffee that was causing these effects.
Exactly. There could be other factors involved, like
Right.
lifestyle, genetics, diet, other things like that.
Okay, so we can't say for sure that drinking coffee will make you live longer,
Not definitively.
but the evidence is pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely something to think about.
Okay, so we've talked about living longer,
Uh-huh.
but what about specific health conditions?
Yeah, well, one of the big ones is cardiometabolic health.
Cardiometabolic health.
Yeah, so that's a term that refers to conditions like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and stroke.
Okay, so pretty serious stuff.
Yeah, very serious stuff.
And what does coffee have to do with all that?
Well, a 2024 study that was published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found that people who drank 2 to 3 cups of coffee per day,
Okay.
which is about 200 to 300 milligrams of caffeine, had a 48.1% lower risk of developing these cardiometabolic conditions compared to non-coffee drinkers.
Wow, that's huge. 48.1% lower risk.
It is a big difference.
So how is coffee doing that? Like, how is it actually protecting us?
Well, there are a few theories.
Okay.
Coffee is full of antioxidants, which can help to protect your cells from damage. It also has some anti-inflammatory effects, and it might even help your body use insulin more effectively.
So coffee is kind of like a multitasker.
Yeah, you could say that.
It does all kinds of things.
Seems to.
Okay, so we've talked about living longer and we've talked about heart disease and diabetes,
Mm.
but what about cancer?
Ah.
I feel like I hear so many different things about whether coffee is good or bad for cancer.
Yeah, you're right. There has been a lot of back and forth over the years.
Right.
Some research suggested a possible link between coffee and certain types of cancers, but more recent research suggests that coffee might actually lower the risk of certain cancers.
Interesting.
Like, for example, there was a study published in PubMed Central that found a possible protective effect against liver and endometrial cancers.
And I think I remember reading something about breast cancer too.
Yes, there is some evidence that coffee might reduce the risk of breast cancer in women after menopause.
Okay, so is it safe to say that coffee can help prevent cancer?
Well, it's not quite that simple. For other types of cancers, like esophageal, pancreatic, or colorectal cancer, the evidence is less clear.
Okay.
Some studies have found a link, some haven't.
So more research is needed.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, but I'm curious, does it matter when you drink your coffee?
Oh, that is a great question.
Like, is there an optimal time of day to get the most benefit?
Well, there was a really interesting study in 2025 that was published in the European Heart Journal, and they found that people who drank coffee in the morning rather than throughout the day had a lower risk of dying from any cause, and particularly from heart problems.
Oh, really? So my afternoon latte isn't doing me as much good as my morning cup.
Well, it's possible.
So like front loading my coffee intake in the morning could be a good thing.
That's what this study suggests.
That's pretty amazing. But why would that be? Like, why would the timing matter so much?
Well, they're still looking into that, but it could be related to our circadian rhythms, which are like our natural sleep-wake cycles.
Hmm.
Or it could be that coffee has a more positive effect on our metabolism in the morning. But we definitely need more research to figure out exactly why the timing seems to matter.
So many questions, so many mysteries.
Yeah,
Okay, so I think it's time to address the elephant in the room.
the caffeine.
Yes, the caffeine. Like, is caffeine good for us or bad for us?
Well, I think it's safe to say that caffeine is a bit of a double-edged sword.
Okay.
On the one hand, it can boost your alertness, improve your cognitive function.
Make you feel more awake and focused.
Exactly.
But I know if I have too much coffee, I definitely start to feel jittery and anxious.
Yeah, that's a common side effect.
Yeah.
Too much caffeine can lead to anxiety, insomnia, and potentially even heart problems.
So how much is too much?
Well, that depends on the person.
Okay.
Everyone processes caffeine differently.
Right.
Some people are more sensitive to it than others.
Yeah.
So the best thing to do is to pay attention to your body and how you feel after you drink coffee.
So like if I start to feel jittery or anxious, I should probably get back.
Exactly.
Okay. Good advice.
You can also try switching to decaf or experimenting with different types of coffee.
Different types.
Yeah, like some people find that lighter roasts have a higher caffeine content than darker roasts.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's really about finding what works best for you.
Personalized coffee advice.
Exactly. And remember, it's not just about how much coffee you drink, but also when you drink it.
Right. We talked about that.
Yeah, if you're trying to maximize the potential benefits and minimize the potential risks, you might want to stick to drinking coffee in the morning.
So morning coffee, good afternoon coffee, maybe not so much.
It seems that way.
Okay, so we've been talking about all these different studies and the potential benefits of coffee.
Yeah,
But we have to remember that most of these studies are observational,
that's right.
which means that they can show us correlations, but they can't necessarily prove cause and effect.
Exactly. And that's an important distinction.
So what are the limitations of these types of studies, and why should we be careful about jumping to conclusions?
Well, one of the main limitations is that observational studies can't account for all the other factors that might be influencing the results.
Like what kind of factors?
Well, things like lifestyle, genetics, other dietary habits, even whether or not someone smokes.
Right.
All of those things can have an impact on someone's health, and it's really difficult to isolate the effects of coffee from all those other factors.
So just because people who drink coffee tend to have certain health outcomes doesn't mean that coffee caused those outcomes.
Exactly. There could be other explanations.
Okay, so it's important to be aware of these limitations and not get too carried away with the findings.
Right.
But even with those caveats, the potential benefits of coffee are still pretty exciting.
Oh, absolutely.
It's amazing to think that something as simple and enjoyable as a cup of coffee could actually be good for us.
I know, right? It's not just about adding years to your life, but adding life to your years.
I like that.
Coffee can boost your energy, enhance your cognitive function.
And it can make social gatherings more enjoyable.
It's-
Okay, so let's talk a bit more about caffeine.
Okay.
We touched on this earlier, but you mentioned that everyone processes caffeine differently.
Right.
Is there any way for people to figure out their own personal caffeine tolerance?
Well, the best way is to just pay attention to how your body responds to caffeine.
Okay.
Start by noticing how you feel after one cup of coffee.
Okay.
Do you feel energized and focused, or do you start to feel jittery, anxious, or have trouble sleeping?
Yeah, I definitely get the jitters if I have too much coffee.
Right, and if you notice any negative effects like that, you might want to try cutting back on your caffeine intake or switching to decaf.
Okay.
You can also experiment with different types of coffee, like we talked about earlier.
Right, like the lighter roasts and the darker roasts.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's all about finding what works best for you.
Yeah, there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Okay, that makes sense.
You need to listen to your body and find what feels right.
Okay, so personalized coffee advice.
Exactly. And remember, it's not just about the amount of coffee you drink, but also the timing.
Right, we talked about that earlier.
Yeah, sticking to coffee in the morning might be a good strategy to maximize the benefits and minimize the risks.
So morning coffee is a go.
Seems to be.
Afternoon coffee, maybe not so much.
Could be.
This is so interesting.
It is, isn't it? There's so much to learn about coffee.
It really is.
And it's a good reminder that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to health and wellness.
Very true.
What works for one person might not work for another.
That's why it's so important to pay attention to your own body and figure out what works best for you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so with all this talk about observational studies and their limitations,
Yeah.
What kind of research do we really need to do to get a more definitive answer about coffee's impact on our health?
Well, the gold standard would be randomized controlled trials.
Randomized controlled trials.
Yeah, basically, these are studies where researchers randomly assign people to either a coffee drinking group or a control group, and then they carefully control all the other factors to try to isolate the effects of the coffee.
So it's like a scientific experiment where you only change one variable at a time.
Exactly.
Okay, so why don't we do more of those types of studies?
Well, they're expensive and they're time consuming,
Well,
especially when you're looking at long-term health outcomes like longevity or disease prevention.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You need a large number of participants and you need to follow them for a long period of time to get reliable results.
So it's a logistical challenge.
It is, but it would definitely give us more definitive answers.
Okay, well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see what the future holds for coffee research.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll learn a lot more in the years to come.
Okay, so even with the limitations of the current research, it seems like moderate coffee consumption, especially in the morning,
Yeah.
might offer a pretty impressive array of benefits.
That does seem to be the consensus based on the available evidence.
So if you enjoy coffee and you're not experiencing any negative side effects, there's no reason to give it up.
Not at all.
In fact, it might actually be good for you.
Could be.
It's pretty amazing to think that something as simple and pleasurable as a cup of coffee could have such a profound impact on our health.
It is pretty remarkable when you think about it.
It really is.
And it's important to remember that coffee is just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
It's not a magic bullet,
Okay.
but it can be a valuable part of a healthy lifestyle.
I think that's a really important reminder.
Absolutely.
Okay, so for all our coffee-loving listeners out there,
Yeah.
what are the key takeaways from all this research? What should we keep in mind as we sip our next cup of coffee?
Oh, I think the main takeaway is that moderation is key.
Okay.
Based on the studies we've discussed, 2 to 3 cups a day seems to be the sweet spot.
Okay.
And if you can try to enjoy your coffee in the morning.
And listen to your body.
Yes, absolutely.
If you're feeling jittery, anxious, or having trouble sleeping, it might be a sign that you need to cut back on the caffeine.
Right, everyone's different. Some people might feel great with just 1 cup a day, while others can handle more without any negative effects.
So pay attention to how coffee makes you feel
Exactly.
and adjust your intake accordingly.
Yep, personalized coffee advice.
Personalized coffee advice. I love it.
It's the future.
And if you have any underlying health conditions, it's always a good idea to talk to your doctor about whether coffee is right for you.
Absolutely. They can help you weigh the potential benefits and risks.
Okay, that's great advice.
Thanks.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I have a whole new perspective on my daily cup of coffee.
Me too.
It's more than just a drink.
It is.
It's like a little ritual,
Yeah,
a little moment of pleasure.
and potentially a health booster.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
It is pretty amazing.
So we hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of coffee and that you feel empowered to make informed decisions about your own coffee habits.
Absolutely.
And until next time, happy sipping.
Happy sipping, everyone. It's kind of like they're snapshots in time. Yeah, exactly.
They can show us trends, but they can't really tell us why those trends are happening.
Right, like we can see that people who drink coffee tend to have certain health outcomes, but we can't say for sure that it was the coffee that caused those outcomes.
Right, because there could be other factors involved.
Exactly, like maybe people who drink coffee also tend to have healthier lifestyles overall. You know, maybe they exercise more, or they eat a healthier diet, or they're less likely to smoke.
So it's like a big tangled knot, and we're trying to untangle it to see which thread is actually holding everything together.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
So we need to be careful about not jumping to conclusions.
Yeah, definitely. But even with those limitations,
Yeah,
I mean, the potential benefits of coffee are still pretty amazing.
they really are.
It's pretty cool to think that something as simple as drinking coffee could actually be good for you.
I know, right? And it's not just about living longer, it's about enjoying the life you have.
Absolutely.
Coffee can give you that boost of energy, enhance your cognitive function. Yeah, it can make those social gatherings a lot more fun, too.
Totally. Okay, so let's go back to caffeine for a second.
Okay.
You mentioned that everyone processes caffeine differently.
Right.
Is there any way for people to figure out their own personal caffeine tolerance?
Well, the best way is to just pay attention to how your body responds to caffeine. So start by noticing how you feel after you have 1 cup of coffee.
Okay.
Do you feel energized and focused? Or do you start to feel jittery or anxious or have trouble sleeping?
I know. I definitely get the jitters if I have too much coffee, especially if I have it later in the day.
Yeah, and if you start to notice those negative effects, you might want to try cutting back on your caffeine or maybe switch to decaf.
Okay.
You can also experiment with different types of coffee, like we were talking about before.
Right, like the lighter roasts versus the darker roasts.
Exactly.
So it's all about finding what works best for your body.
Yeah, there's no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to coffee.
Personalized coffee advice.
I like it.
It's the future of coffee.
Maybe so.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about observational studies
Yeah,
and their limitations.
right.
What kind of research do we really need to get those definitive answers about coffee's impact on our health?
Well, the gold standard in medical research is the randomized controlled trial.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So basically, researchers randomly assign people to either a coffee drinking group or a control group.
Mm.
And they very carefully control all the other factors that could influence the results.
So like a real scientific experiment.
Yeah, exactly.
But why don't we do more of those types of studies?
Well, it comes down to money and time.
Of course.
Randomized controlled trials are expensive, and they take a lot of time, especially when we're talking about long-term health outcomes, like whether coffee can help you live longer or prevent disease.
Yeah, you'd have to follow people for years.
Exactly, and you need a lot of participants to get reliable results.
Okay, so logistically, it's a big challenge.
It is, but those are the studies that would give us the most definitive answers.
Okay, well, I guess we'll have to wait and see what future research tells us.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a lot more to learn in the coming years.
All right, so even with the limitations of the research that we have now,
Uh-huh.
it seems like moderate coffee consumption, especially in the morning,
Yeah.
might be good for us.
It really does seem that way.
So for all those coffee lovers out there who aren't experiencing any negative side effects,
Right.
keep enjoying your coffee.
Yeah, there's no reason to stop.
It might actually be good for you.
It could be a real health booster.
It's incredible to think that something as simple and enjoyable as a cup of coffee could have such a big impact on our health.
It's pretty remarkable, isn't it?
It really is.
And, it's important to remember that coffee is just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
It's not a magic bullet,
Okay.
but it can be a valuable part of a healthy lifestyle.
I think that's a really important takeaway for our listeners.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so let's wrap up by going over the key points for our coffee-loving audience.
Sounds good.
What should they keep in mind as they're enjoying their next cup of coffee?
Well, first of all, moderation is key.
Yeah.
2 to 3 cups a day seems to be the sweet spot based on the research we've looked at.
Okay, 2 to 3 cups.
And try to enjoy your coffee in the morning if you can.
Morning coffee is the way to go.
Seems to be.
And another really important point,
Yeah.
listen to your body.
Absolutely. If you're feeling jittery or anxious or having trouble sleeping, you might need to cut back on the caffeine.
Okay?
Everyone's different.
Right.
Some people can handle more caffeine than others.
So pay attention to how you feel
Exactly.
and adjust your coffee intake accordingly.
Yep. It's all about personalized coffee advice.
Personalized coffee advice, I love it.
It's the future.
And one last thing,
Yeah.
if you have any underlying health conditions, make sure to talk to your doctor about whether coffee is right for you.
Absolutely. They can help you weigh the potential benefits and risks.
Okay, that's great advice.
Thanks.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive.
It really has.
I feel like I've learned so much about my favorite drink.
Me too.
Coffee is more than just a beverage.
Yeah, it's part of our culture.
It's a ritual, a social connector.
It brings people together.
It really does.
So we hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of coffee and that you feel empowered to make informed decisions about your own coffee habits.
Absolutely. And until next time,
Happy sipping, everyone.
it's like we think about it as this like quick energy fix, right?
Yeah, just a way to get going in the morning.
But now as we've really dived into the research, it seems like there's so much more to it.
Yeah, it really makes you appreciate that cup of coffee even more.
It does. And, I was thinking about something you said earlier
Mm-hmm.
about how we should be more mindful about our coffee consumption.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's such a great point. Like, instead of just like gulping it down,
Right.
we should really try to savor the aroma and the taste and really appreciate the whole experience.
Yeah, slow down, engage your senses.
Like a ritual. And I think, when we do that, it becomes more than just a drink. It becomes like a form of self-care.
It really does.
But I think it's important to remember that coffee is just one piece of the puzzle when it comes to living a healthy life.
Of course, you can't just rely on coffee to solve all your health problems.
Right. It's not a magic bullet.
No, but it can definitely be a valuable part of a healthy lifestyle.
So coffee is like a supporting character in our overall health journey.
I like that analogy.
not the leading role.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's funny, we've talked a lot about the potential health benefits of coffee,
Uh-huh.
but we haven't really talked about the cultural and social significance of coffee.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other topic.
It is, and I think it's an important one because coffee is so much more than just a drink.
It really is. It's like woven into the fabric of our lives.
It's true. It's a ritual, a social connector, a source of comfort.
Yeah, for a lot of people, it's how they start their day.
It's how they connect with friends and colleagues.
It's how they get their creative juices flowing.
It's true. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of coffee,
Yeah.
I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder.
A question to think about over their next cup of coffee.
Exactly. So what role does coffee play in your life beyond its potential effects on your physical health?
Does it help you connect with people?
Does it inspire you?
Does it give you a moment of peace in a busy day?
We encourage you to reflect on your own personal relationship with coffee
Yeah, think about what it means to you.
and appreciate the many ways it enriches our lives.
And until next time, happy sipping, everyone.
Happy sipping.